Hey guys, welcome. In this video we're going to talk somewhat briefly about data types. So question number one, why are they needed? The reason is simple. The world is varied, and because different kinds of objects exist, different data types are needed. Simple enough. Okay, so now let's talk about the following. Make a new project and let's take a look at data types in action and code. Console application as before. Click OK. There you go. So do that. And now let's begin by typing the following. You're going to type int. That's a data type. It's an integer data type more specifically. And notice that because it's blue, this is a keyword like this. Okay? Now further, you're going to give it a name. You're going to type number, say, of dogs like this. And notice I'm using a particular kind of casing. This is known as a camel casing. You can see like the O is capitalized, D is capitalized, so we call it camel casing. Next, you're going to say number of dogs, say, equals 5. There you go. So why is the integer data type right for the number of dogs? Because integers are whole numbers like -50, 0, and say 36. Okay? Now, if you want, if you type U, it says a 32-bit unsigned integer, so if you choose that, we can also use that. You see unsigned integer if you want. For our purposes, integer is sufficient. Okay, but do keep in mind you can't really actually see -25 dogs on the street, because then you know that would be something wrong. Okay, so let's move on. Now say we want to display this, so we will type console dot and then write line, and then we'll say here the value. Let's do it this way. Yesterday there were. Then you're gonna placeholder here dogs in the house I visited, period, comma, type the name of the variable, number of dogs, and close it with a semicolon. Okay, so what this will do is place the number of dogs into the string here and display it on the console window as one unit essentially. Okay, now here let's talk about these. Let's comment this. It says integer number of dogs, and this here declares, okay, so a variable. Okay, now variables are used to represent quantities that are unknown or quantities that can change. That's a basic definition. Okay, and of course in programming, variable names follow specific rules, but I just usually go with give it a meaningful name so that when you look at it, you know what it represents. If you like, of course, you can refer to MSDN, where all of the rules are, listed in very fine detail, but to be honest, I have always found that kind of reading to be extremely boring. Okay, so declares a variable. Next, we're going to say here sets the value of the variable, like that. In other words, it's initializing the number of dogs to 5. And then the next line here will print the number of dogs on the screen. Alright, so this is one data type. Next, you're going to type this. You're going to type double, and then you're going to say length of, say, wood equals, and now you can type 32.75, close with a semicolon. So this is a new data type, double. Notice that this one here has 0.75, so it can, store fractional information, okay, decimals. And further, it's underlined green. It says the variable is assigned, but its value is never used. Well, that's not really an error. We can fix that. Just type console, right line, and then you're going to say lumberjack cut a board that was, and now you're going to put a placeholder in here, inches long or something like that, okay? And then length of wood. And now if you want, you can leave it as length of wood, but just to show you that you can type dot, and this is dot notation. And notice when you hit that, IntelliSense comes up and it brings up additional functionality, one of which is toString. So you can select toString and close that with a semicolon like this. Okay, toString is a function. We'll talk about how to make our own and use, this is a simple example of a function. Or if you want, you can just type length of wood. I wanted to make you aware that toString exists. Okay, let's talk about one more kind of data type. You're going to type now decimal here. You see that? Okay, so say money in bank. Okay, I'll say money spent equals, and now type 678.98 and put an M and close with a semicolon. So now there's an M. This is good for financial applications, this kind of data type. Alright, now we're going to display, so console.writeLine, and then John has just spent, and then you will place that there, okay, comma, and then money spent closed with a semicolon, like this. Okay. So notice this is a little different because these two lines, unlike the ones that are already commented, this line here both declares and sets a variable like this. Okay? And the same thing down here, both declaring and setting a variable in one line, whereas the first two first declares and then sets the value in a separate line. But ultimately they're equivalent anyway for our purposes. There you go. Of course, let's remove these unnecessary usings from here. Okay, there you go. Go away. Wonderful. Let's give this a build. There you go. So debug and start without debugging. And there it is. So yesterday there were 5 dogs in the house I visited. The lumberjack cut a board that was 32.75 inches long, and John has just spent 678.98. And now let's add a bit of formatting to this one here. So we'll add C here. Okay. Recurrent C. And further, let's add a console.read. Okay, and remember, for our purposes, read key, read line, they're all equivalent in the context of these simple examples. Obviously, there are great details that concern each one that make them not equivalent, but for the context of a simple example like this, they function as basically ways of keeping the window from disappearing. So in that logical sense, they are equivalent. In fine level detail, they obviously are not equivalent at all. Okay, so here, give it a build, and now let's go debug and step into. And now let's go through this very carefully. You see, all of these variables show up in the locals window, and notice that number of dogs is 0, length of wood is 0.0, and the money spent looks like 0, but when you double click, it says 0M. You see that? So there's an M present, okay, that's not showing by default. And notice that there are also types here, integer, double, and decimal. There you go. And now let's take a look. This also tells you what the default values are of these variables, what they're initialized to by default. Okay, let's walk through this. The number of dogs has been set to 5, we print that. Length of wood is set to 32.75, then we printed. And then money spent is set to 679.98. And notice that here, if you double click this, there's also an M after that still. There you go. And then lastly, we call console.read to keep the window, and everything is printed on the screen. There you go. So click that off the screen. One more thing that I do want to show you. I think I remember you do have the option of just doing start without debugging, right? And then it says that. Okay, if you remove console.read here, and you debug and start without debugging, it says press any key to continue. See? Different ways. Okay, it's good to know, right? So here, I just like console.read, so I'll use it. Or read line or read key, one of those, whichever one you want for our purposes, fine. Now, one more thing, which is this. What if you want to get more information about these data types? This is what you can do. Debug and say step into. And look very carefully. If you have your mouse over integer and you expand that, it says, you see that little symbol there that looks like a couple branches? Remember, that's indicating it's a class, okay? See that? And the base object, okay? So an integer is a kind of object. In fact, everything is a kind of object. The parent class, the thing that sits at the top of the whole hierarchy that we will discuss in much more detail, is the object class. Okay? Now here, what if you hover over a double and you expand that, and you see the base again is object. You see that? There you go. And further, this also provides useful information because it tells you the max value, the min value, and some other, fine pieces of information. But the integer, if you do that, hover your mouse over it, and you expand that, tells you the max value, that tells you the min value, and so on. Okay, note that this is positive, this is negative, so these are signed quantities indeed. If you want here, you can do that. Okay, and then you can type a comment. You can click that off the screen. See, it's pretty cool. Alright, so let me unload this from memory. And that is it for our purposes, and thank you very much, guys. I will see you in the next video, so make sure you can reproduce this code, answer the quiz questions, and a few couple small assignments that I have in the sidebar. Thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next video.